Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode on Founders Tribe, a podcast production presented by thestartupchef.com. This is once again your host, Sven Milder, and like every week, I invite inspiring global movers and shakers to the show to casually chat about successful strategies they have deployed to found and build awesome businesses and live fulfilling lives. At the Startup Chef, we are on a mission to elevate and inspire 100,000 founders globally to help them shortcut their road to success by offering easy access to investment capital and world-class expertise. If you want to discover more or download one of our free resources that can help you propel your business forward, visit us at thestartupchef.com. Thestartupchef.com. Now, without further ado, let's jump straight into today's episode.
In today's podcast, we have Mr. Florian Holm, originally from Germany, and since 6 years he's moving mountains in Southeast Asia, where he first started as a consultant for Boston Consultancy Group. He went on building shop in the terms of lazada, which is better known as the Amazon of Southeast Asia. He led the team into different kind of countries and to different kind of landscape, turbulence and smooth waters, where eventually the venture gets sold by Alibaba. After a few months rest, he decided to build something completely different, which is the function that he's currently having as a founder and CEO, together with Alexis Dornier, building Stilt Studios, which is a tiny house concept and literally beautiful designs, and those can be literally stuck everywhere in the world. And we're going to talk about that later. Amongst that, he's a father of a young boy named Kilian and loves to spend a lot of time outdoors. Welcome, Florian, to the show today.
Thank you, Sven.
Yes, I'm super thrilled as a good friend as well to have you here.
Exactly.
We have off the record already many different kind of conversations, and for me this was a big inspiration as well to bring your knowledge to a larger audience. So let's straight jump into it, right? From e-commerce giant to building tiny designer houses. I mean, how did you arrive at that transition, man?
Yeah, it's a good question, Sven, and I think it was a bit situational, but I was 4 years with Lazada, and it was an awesome time, right? Like really great learnings, and really great also for personal development. But after that, I felt what I wanted to do is, I wanted to do something different, and what was important to me at that point was I wanted to build my own product. I was working for a marketplace, right, or one 3P business, and I was always fascinated by building an own product. Honestly speaking, I'm not the big product guy in the sense that I have like this one passion for a certain product where I'm really good in. So it was a bit of a strike of faith that I met with my current business partner, Alexis Dornier, who is a great architect, I feel, and some very innovative ideas around design, around how to build, so also for the building process itself. But yeah, looking out at that point for someone who's has more experience in how to build a business. And that's how we decided to team up. And I felt it was a great opportunity to build a product. It was a great opportunity to bring in some elements that I really care about, like sustainability. And at the same time, it was also very interesting for me to go from an industry which I feel is maturing more and more, e-commerce, with all its consequences, to an industry that I think is a bit overseen by entrepreneurs. Not too many people in it, definitely a bit less kind of like new things tried or innovation happening, and try to bring in a bit of fresh wind in the small scale. Obviously we started up, but that was kind of the attraction for me, and has been amazing. Almost 1.5 years now. First products are building up, and more coming soon.
Yeah, well, it truly looks awesome. I will definitely put a link in the show notes to the website Stilt Studios. But for those who don't know the concept about tiny houses, what is the true vision that you hope to achieve?
there's a couple of things we try to bring to the market with the still studios, and to summarize it, we try to bring great design with innovative together with innovative building methods. So being able to build more offsite, to build more prefab, which means you are more cost efficient, you can handle material better, and you are much faster in setting up. And then build something that is really like experience oriented in terms of the product. That is very much what we focus on for now. But so it's basically the first houses we are setting up are all short-term rental focus, but the concept of bringing together great design and innovative building materials will also work for any other sector within the building space. So you can also have that as a residential home, or even like for Indonesia, for like middle class housing for $20,000, right?
Correct.
So that is basically the idea.
So can we as well say that because the concept is very much mobile driven, right, that you would facilitate that if someone is done living in a certain space, they could literally pick it up and you could drop it anywhere in the world, or how do you see that?
Yeah, that is something that could be possible, right? But I don't think that is necessarily our strongest point. It's a bit like it's still a structure, right? So there will still be some damage done. So I think putting it up, putting it down again and up again. But nevertheless, I mean, like I think the one important point that swings in here is kind of like leaving or minimizing the impact of a building on the building ground, right? So it's something we see a lot in especially the tourist destinations, that things just you have a really nice rice paddy, and then the next day like everything gets full of beton, right? And we need to find a different way, right? Like on how we can kind of like keep the balance of, on the one hand, tourism can be something very good for the communities, but at the other hand, it destroys a lot. And I think that is one aspect of the houses we are building is helping to balance that.
So you and I have both separately in our own companies worked with large teams. I can imagine if you're starting up a large team, then there are so many moving parts, and now you're building something completely out of your comfort zone with a team that is way smaller than that, right? So does it give you a lot of peace of mind compared to your previous period? Or do you sometimes get a little bit frustrated that things are not moving as fast when you had a whole army to move mountains?
It's a very good question, right? And I wouldn't say the one thing is better than the other. And I think, for me personally, it's mostly about the phase of life I'm in, right? Or it's kind of like I've done the one, so I enjoy the other for now. But I think both things, they are great learning opportunities for someone, and I think that is ultimately something that is extremely important for me and very motivating for me. So yeah, I'm in a new space right now, and I'm learning a lot of things. So that is the important part for me. And even though the team is smaller, it's still like every day there's so many new things that come to me. So that is something very fascinating. But I also liked working with big teams, right? Like it's definitely a different set of challenges you encounter, maybe a little bit of more HR management. You're definitely moving a bit faster. So yeah, I think both things have their pros and cons, and I think you just need to know what is the thing you want to do in the moment, right? I think both things can be very good.
Well, what I see as a sort of red thread through your stories, like when you were leading Lazada, you had a CEO together with Duri. I think that's a very interesting chat as well, because a lot of times being a CEO is a very lonely ride, though you can have your COO and you can have your CFOs. How did you experience running and building Lazada from actually scratch in the different kind of countries as a duo, and how would you compare that towards being a single CEO? Would it otherwise have a difference?
Yeah.
Do you think that every company should have two CEOs to make life of an entrepreneur easier?
I mean, I think it's a huge benefit if you find someone that you can really work with well. You complement each other. I think it's a huge benefit, right? I think I think I was lucky with Dewey that, it's a good friend, and we have been working together already before we entered kind of in this co-CEO role, and it worked out very well for us, right? Because I think we complement each other well, and we were taking care of different areas, and at the same time we knew each other well enough to also be very frank about things that were not doing so great, right?
Yeah.
That is always where kind of the tension comes in the company, in whatever relation you are, right? Like boss to CEO or whatever. And I think that is, I was just really fortunate in that. But at the same time, I think it also needs a company that is at the right stage, because, like where we are right now, right, where we kind of decided to take a step back and really go and assemble something from zero. You kind of need to have this phase where I think you are more like the fighter out there, and putting in the first basis before you have a critical scale to kind of like make space for enough senior management, right? So I think hard to generalize, but if you're lucky enough to find like this partner, I think it's beneficial for the business and yourself, right? Because you will.
So it's more like we can see it as a sort of co-founder, but in this specific example, it's on the same level. Currently, that happens again, but then in another way, right? So I see that you are very, very well talented to build in a fast-scale teams. Currently, with Alexis, is very much focused on the creative side. You're doing the operation. Personally, I believe that picking up your own weaknesses in an early stage and finding people around you that are able to support you, and therefore being able to run faster is a very much a lucky thing. What every founder should be striving for. So if you're looking back currently and you're bringing things from your Lazada time here to Stilt, right? What are the things that you have been learning there that is currently really, again, an epiphany moment? In the new venture that you're building, right? You go from super. I like the comparison between e-commerce giant and tiny house builder, but still a very big company. So I'm just wondering, like, okay, what are the things that you really bring along from your previous endeavor to the current one?
Yeah, great question, Sven. And I think again, it's some learnings where you feel like things that went really well at my previous job, Lazada, right? I think one thing we always were known for and certainly did well is just getting things done, right? Like a culture of working hard and making sure, like goals are achieved and like setting the goals in the first place at a level where you really have to stretch for it, right? And I think that is one nice thing I can bring here to the team, where I'm like, hey, like, doesn't matter that we are not that many people, we have limited resources and all, but we can still achieve great things, right? And
do you use a special technique for the goal setting here?
Yeah, so I think the one thing I can be sharing is, for example, in Lazada, like one way to kind of rally the troops has always been these campaigns, right? Like, so we said like once in a while, I mean, and by now I'm, especially if you see Shopee and e-commerce space, they do that almost every month. But I think it's really nice, right? Because it's a way of motivating your people, but also getting the best out of them, making sure, you work productive towards a certain goal. And I think that is something really great if you have your resources willing to work longer, to get things fixed, to get to a certain point, and then have a clear moment of kind of like success, or like a moment of coming out, right? So, for example, like last week we did a soft launch, right? And in a way, it's Corona times and all, right? Like you can think like, yeah, how relevant is that from the outside? But I can tell you from the inside, from a company, it's so nice, right? Like to have a certain date and a certain event that you build up to, and then you have everyone, like the product team, the engineering team, obviously the marketing, everyone is working towards this one moment, and you're just like having a little birthday party and cleaning up your house, right? Everyone is doing a little extra, and indeed we got a very good result of it. So no one is ever complaining. It's like, oh, I put in 2 hours extra to fix the website, or I put in 2 hours extra making sure all our contractors finish the job and so on. that is really something that I took over from Lazada, and that I can really kind of like pass on as a very positive learning that I would always try as an for any startup in any situation. Like, find yourself the right moments or stepstones or whatever, right? It doesn't need to be a soft launch, doesn't even need to be consumer facing or whatever, right? But these are great moments, right? And
so you mean like event? If we need to create a word out of it, you want to create an event from as much of the activities that you plan to do in a year, and try to create small little parties of it, small little events, and therefore people are able to feel, of course, like a sense of bonding and being collectively involved. So you're naming campaigning. That cannot really come on the right word. Eventizing, I think it like that. So do you using an OKR goal set up for that, or you have another strategy?
So for the campaign itself, or like for the event itself, I think I like to set my OKRs a little bit different. I wouldn't set them necessarily on the events, because these events, there is a lot of, at least at the early stage, I feel there can be a lot of chance or coincidence interacting with how they come out, right? So I can give you an example. We do a soft launch, right? And so actually not for the one we did, but for our actual launch event we are looking for now, turns out that someone in my team has a personal contact, a friend who is an influencer, right? And for that event, like, awareness is obviously a big goal, right? And this personal friend of hers has several million followers, right? And then you kind of potentially shoot completely over in that target, right, or in that goal, because for a coincidence in the end, right? It's not for the hard work you put in. So that's why I kind of like to decouple it from the OKRs, right? Where I say, like, for each function, obviously, like, hey, try to reach like whatever is the room of possibilities, right? So it might be in the marketing side, but I try to keep that out. But at the same time, I see it as kind of like, it's almost like a sprint, right? Like, where the company comes together and for all the functions, they're pushing towards this one event. And then obviously there needs to be also like a clear sign of success, be it sales, certain sales numbers, be it certain awareness numbers, or whatever it is. And then exactly what you said, right? Like, this bonding experience, like, make sure you like at the end of the day or start of the campaign, or whatever the event might be, that's the perfect time to give a little party, right? Make sure you have some drinks ready. That a particular example, we had a barbecue at the office and stuff, and it's awesome from a company's perspective, because everyone, or 95% of the cases, people feel great about it. They put in extra work. There's an extra bonding. So it's a true win-win.
I noticed it myself as well. Creating good relationships with your team, being very informal, like we say, bonding, collectivity. Eventually, we could say, let's not make things super complicated, and bring it back to the essence why people are working towards something, right? I mean, I think the days of a paycheck are over, and people are looking way more currently for the sense of belonging. So what is an interesting question, especially currently in this space of Corona that you quickly tapped into. So how do you foresee the future when it comes to remote working, right? Because there was a time where a lot of companies always try to keep their teams within these four walls, and everybody needs to come in at 9 and they run in at 6 or 7, or when they are a startup, they can sometimes stay until 8 or 9 o'clock. And everybody was very skeptic about it. This wouldn't work. And now, by the force of nature, literally, leaders have been obligated to let people work remotely. And strange enough, it has a really good impact. So I'm very curious, you as an expert, but more also like a true experience in the field. How do you see the world moving after COVID?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, right? And I myself, I need to admit, I've always been a fan of kind of like, especially for brainstorming sessions and so on, like, I'm like a proper German, and in a way I run my weekly schedule in a way that, like, I do my check-ins, I make sure the touch points are in the calendar, right? To make sure that, even in stressful times when And usually we're like, yeah, I check in once a week, right? And then it's a stressful week and you didn't do any check-in, right? And it has been a learning experience for me to see that, actually there's a lot of benefits as well from having your team working remotely. And it's more up to techniques, right? To making sure you use the right techniques, right? So, for example, you don't do like your weekly town hall announcing some certain decisions, right? Like maybe you do a video update call, but at the same time, writing down decisions or making sure they're communicated is becoming much more important, right? So what do you do? Like maybe you actually do a quick video, no? Like we are doing it now, and you just record it for the team, so it's clear for everyone. If someone wants to know, like, hey, why did we back in the days take the decision to go left and not right? Look at it, right, and find the argument, find the arguments again, and I think that is actually something that might be even better than what we used to do, right? Where we announce it once and then, like some people got it, some not, and then there's the silent post in the company, like. And I think back of the days in a larger company. So I think there's definitely a lot of learnings and techniques that we can also implement for a post-corona time when, in theory at least, like people can work again together. But I definitely feel, right now, like I would say the most important part, at least, of what we are doing at Stilt is product development. We have people from the design side, from the engineering side, and so on different locations. And yeah, it's something people need to get used to, but it definitely works, right? So,
but do you see that in the future? Do you expect that offices are getting completely other functions, or do we say the end to co-working, or I'm very curious, because if you see it from a financial point of view, right? It's interesting where people would pay. For example, a good example is this in Silicon Valley. Jack Dorsey from Twitter, right, is literally deciding like, okay, normally we are paying like $100,000s of dollars in rent to just be in Silicon Valley and be stupid as everybody else paying prime for our rent. And Jack Dorsey from Twitter and Square, of course, is the first one that said, okay, fine, we are moving Twitter outside of Silicon Valley and currently deciding to just start a very much a remote-driven organization and have super quality events periodically with our team members anywhere around the world. Which of course comes back to having access to way better talent and not fishing all in the same pond, right? Because especially when you're also in Lazada, you're all hunting for the same developer, and the same developer is getting more expensive in less than a year, right? He's changing 2-time jobs and he's growing and selling on that way. So I'm just curious, what will happen with real estate, man? Will real estate go down in that sense?
Sven, look, like, here's my take on that, right? Because, I'm in the space, right? So I had some thoughts on it, right? And so I would say, if you see some regions like where you have a high concentration of talent, like Silicon Valley, and then prices shoot up for real estate, I think definitely, right? Like, makes tons of sense that you have kind of the decentralization. And I think also team-wise, everything is there nowadays, right? Like, there's so many productivity tools, like things that make the organization work well, and even accessible to very small startups, right? Like I remember, like back in the days in BCG, like you had your Cisco systems conferencing staff, and you would need to call the IT office manager to set it up, right? And now we're hanging out on Zoom, and it's like manifold better than what we had back in the days, right? And I'm working with Monday and some other tools here for the small startup, and it's all affordable and great, right? But at the same time, I think it's a bit dependent on the location and on the phase of life you're in, right? And why I'm saying that is, when I look at my employees I'm working here with in Stilt, as well as when I think back on the Lazada times, a lot of them were very young, right? So, somewhere between 20 to 30. And they were living in Jakarta. And actually, a lot of times, if they were not living with the family, they live in a kos-kosan, right? These people, they will actually be like, I'm happy to go back in my crowded office and meet up with people and all, right? While if you're a programmer back in Silicon Valley and you're like I'm poor but still making 150K because like half of that is going out for rent and I'm living in in a shared flat, like basically same as a Costco set, just that it costs me like 5,000
like
bucks.
1,000 times
right?
expensive. Yeah.
You know, like they're like, I can have like the time of my life living, you know, like I personally, I would move to Boulder if I were in their shoes with my personal preferences, and you know, get a nice ride of mountain biking in the morning, and have a house for the, you know, like a mansion almost for the same price as I was paying for my shared flat in San Francisco. But at the same time, I think it's also a matter of like, where are you in life, right? Because personally, you know, like I have a small family now, right? And I think like in that situation, you start really appreciating having a bit of space, being a bit out there, right? Like, I mean, Jakarta versus Bali, for example. That's why I feel like there will be a wave of more people being in a situation, and you know, honestly, I see that a lot with friends of mine, like living in Munich or in London or New York or wherever, with young families, right? And paying a fortune for a relatively modest flat there, while they can have an awesome quality of life here in Bali. And I think you will probably find more and more these remote networks, you know, be it in the countries like in the US and different places. I'm just reading like more and more Texas, for example, is kind of like coming up as a hub, simply because for, you know, kind of lifestyle and quality of life and prices. But it could also be a place like Bali, where you have like a very good infrastructure for families, and instead of just having like your typical digital nomads and very few entrepreneurs around you, you might actually have a senior manager from Unilever who's managing Europe and maybe flying back once a quarter for a couple of days for the most urgent things that need to be done in person, and actually the rest can be done remotely. So I think it really depends, right? Like I wouldn't be betting on office space in big centers, especially in big expensive centers, right? But I think, you know, probably residential real estate in what could be, you know, kind of like these more lifestyle driven centers, you know, I think in the mid to long term, that could actually be something that is doing well.
You know, and thanks for sharing your opinion about it. I guess, first of all, we are both very lucky that we actually make Bali our home. And I think especially now Bali comes out of the whole COVID-19 crisis as some kind of special treatment where we seem to control the virus pretty well, have amazing beaches, have a great quality of life, take care of relatively all kinds of facilities. So then we're talking actually about life balance, right? And before the call, we were also, that fits very well what we're talking about right now. Before the call, we were already talking a little bit about life balance. And we were discussing like, okay, why should we want to build something that everybody is building? And that brings me back to the same conversation that we just had about Silicon Valley, where all of these guys are like, okay, how many millions of dollars have you been raising, right? The real question is that it's not even what they're building and the impact that they're having. It's more like, I still remember me myself there. It's you're asking someone, okay, how big is your team? How much money did you raise? Like, and people seem to forget that it's all about creating that impact, driving that sustainability within a business, which was like years ago crazy, just like investing. And now you're also tapping actually quickly into life balance. And these three things together brings me to the term that you coined in the start of our conversation, is incremental innovation, right? Yeah. Tell everybody incremental innovation. How you would describe it is doing something meaningful and innovate. But I'm not the right guy to explain it, and you coined it yourself. So I really want to bring this in the conversation actually, because it could be of value for everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, that is something that I've just been thinking about, you know, when I left Lazada, when I was contemplating my next steps, and at least something that at that moment was important to me, right? And I think in every phase of life and every person has their own kind of North Star, what guides them and at that point. And, you know, the money that can be fine, right? Like I definitely, before having money, I think money was also more important to me. But I think it's a very nice way to think about, like, how do you spend your time and on what do you spend your time, right? And I think when you look at it from a societal level, like what is kind of the your personal impact or your company's impact to the society or to innovation, right? Because in the end, like no matter if you're successful or not, that is the interesting part. You might actually contribute quite well to societal innovation, right? And like I guess like one guy to bring up here would be Elon Musk saying like, hey, we need to become more sustainable in the way we use personal transport. So the mission of Tesla is actually not necessarily being the biggest automaker or whatever metrics you want to take, but it's actually like helping electric vehicles to break through. And even if another one is actually eating the cake in the end, he would still define it as a success, right? And it's an interesting way to think about it, and an interesting way to see how people are motivated, right? And I think my feeling was when at the time I left Lazada in 2018, and you mentioned some of these things, right? Like the tech scene has become so crowded, right? I mean, I still remember like back in the days when I started with Lazada, like people were like, "What are you doing?" Like, okay, like I went out of BCG, and the classical thing to do, like back where I was in Switzerland, is like, yeah, you go into banking, you get a pretty decent paycheck. It's an old industry. It's that's what you do, right? And or pharma, for example, right? It's also big there. And I went into e-commerce, and everyone and it was not like a hip thing like it is now, right? And I felt like, well, there's still a lot of things you can do. There's still a lot of kind of things to work on, and honestly, like the way we approached it versus how professional things are now, like definitely, like tons of stuff has changed. But at the same time, what you also see is that tons of talent went in there, right? And now I think like e-commerce is developing up to its potential. So all the things that you can say, like the innovation it brings to society in terms of helping small businesses find their customers, cheaper prices for consumers, more assortment, and so on. That's great, right? That's definitely a value on a societal level. But if you go into e-commerce now, the difference you will be making now, right? What do? You're a product manager maybe for one specific step on the checkout, right? And like while maybe back in the days when we were starting and doing tons of mistakes and all, like we increased conversion rate. Maybe we doubled it by improving the checkout process. Nowadays, like believe me, there's already 1,000 engineers working on that process, and I've been working on that for years. And your personal contribution, like if ever you can measure it, will be in the in the low promilles, right? And the interesting part is that, and I feel that is actually the case for a lot of areas of tech, right? I mean, if you join Google or Amazon or one of these big companies now, like it's such a huge organization, and it's just very difficult to bring that impact. But if you look at other areas, right? For example, if I look at building, at real estate construction, man, that's a place where like it's a huge industry, right? Like everyone is doing it. There's tons of activities ongoing, but if I look at the innovation that is happening, it's little, right? So it's and if I look and why, right? It's not that there's tens of thousands of highly talented people trying their luck and somehow not succeeding, right? It's a place where we're missing the talent, we're missing the entrepreneurial talent, we're missing the technical talent, right? And I felt like, and it's not the only area, right? I mean, I think there's
real estate. What you actually say is like a lot of technology startups. They actually, they just forget about what it's actually truly about, and then you're having another industry that you quickly check into, which is very much related to what you're doing right now, is the lack of innovation in real estate. And one of the things that really came across my mind when I hear you talking is as a human being, we should actually let our voice count, right? Is that what you're trying to say? It's like if you're anyway on this earth, don't dig yourself into a hole, but ask yourself really like, okay, what is the thing that I'm able to do that really drives an impact that is close to lays close to your heart?
Yeah, right, exactly. And I mean, just stepping back and being like, hey, if you live to the age of 80 and you sit in front of your porch on a chair and contemplate about life, right? Like, what can you really look back to, right? And
are you actively busy with that on a daily basis, contemplating?
Yeah, I think it's it's always difficult when I think about opportunities, because obviously there's the very practical aspect, but there's also the aspect of like really double checking, right? Is it something that I would feel like, I would feel proud of, no matter some of the classical success metrics, right? So for me, it's like, saying about the buildings we are putting, right? If, some of the discussions we're having, we're like, what happens if people take our design or whatever, right? And I feel in the very long term, I would feel great if I feel I contributed to something that is an ongoing process, right? And maybe in 50 years, we have a very different way of living and thinking about building, and probably prefab will be much more dominant, and very hopefully sustainable building will be much more dominant. And you can be like, well, in a very, very, very tiny way, I contributed to this process. I put down one stone in that process, right? Like, you will never be the only one driving that forward, right? But I think that is definitely one thing that very much attracted me to the current opportunity and currently what I'm working on. And I just need to say that, right? I think there's other industries as well, right? Like, for example, if you think about education, I know tons of stuff going on right now, especially with the situation, and definitely some innovation happening. But the big scheme of things, for the industry, definitely, not as much disrupted as for example e-commerce in the past years, or fintech, or ride-hailing, or all the media stuff, right? I mean, like, tons of the innovation that happened was in entertainment, right? Like TikTok, Netflix, Facebook, right? It's like, well, good you have that, right? And I'm using it, everyone is using it, but how did that change life
it's interesting, man. Very interesting. Very interesting. I actually really hear your almost like a messias, providing a bigger message, right? Where you typically say like, okay, if you're anyway here, do things with a meaning. Can we actually say that this is a result after you have literally worked your socks off in your previous company, that you came more down to earth and you think like, what the fuck am I doing? And that you had that process in that kind of way.
Yeah, I think, definitely there were moments where I'm like, okay, like, for what? But I don't think that is something bad, right? It's like running a marathon.
No.
Tons of moments where you ask yourself, like, what am I doing here? And the moment you cross the finish line, you're like very, very happy that you went through this process. But at the same time, I like, having been in the tech scene for a long time, like, I think it's good to try to be reflective as well, and see, and then it's obviously also a personal thing, right? Like, there's no right or wrong, right? I mean, if it's really someone's passion as a product manager to work on this small tiny thing within a big machinery that you can still improve, then go for it, right? Like, then do it. But I think at the same time, like, personally, I would like to see more innovation in that space, like in these kind of like forgotten area, like industries that have not been as central in kind of like VC discussions or what's or not. And I feel like it's a bit of a herd behavior that we are seeing amongst VCs, and then kind of following founders and talent that flows into the scene.
Interesting. I want to respect your time as well, because we actually had the podcast plan. We put it a little bit more upfront. I mean, this is all about inspiring people, making the right steps. I would like to close down actually with two things. One is stilled, and the other one is more like, what questions, if we're talking about the beautiful term incremental innovation, which means bringing meaning to the things that you're doing, asking yourself about the impact. What are the questions, maybe you can create a top 3, that you believe everybody should ask themselves in order to make a better step for their career or ambition or life or what it is?
I mean, it's really about,
3 questions.
Being brave and taking the time to do a step back, right? So first question should be like, what is really the problem I'm helping to solve on a societal level, right? Like I'm displacing another business with my business, right? There's not necessarily an incremental for like an incremental use for the society, right? And also like trying to think a bit longer term, right? It's kind of like, what are really the things that matter or that make a difference to people's life, right? So around sustainability, or could also be education or whatever, right? So I think that is an important one, right? Not necessarily like, how do you spend, like how like, can you get people hooked to something? Like, we know, yeah, you can, right? You can get people hooked to TikTok or
crazy
short-term pleasures, right? Like to smoking or having a drink or whatever. But kind of like, what is kind of like the long-term thing you can achieve, and then like obviously also like, what can I do about it, right? Because there's limitations, right? I was lucky in like I know how to build businesses, but I'm not a designer, and I was lucky enough to be able to find Alexis and partner up with someone who I feel is very good in that part. And so you also need to be realistic, right? If I say like I believe what we need is actually like a cheaper and better space shuttle, and I'm not a rocket engineer. There's very, very little that I could do in that field, right? So.
Well, what's strange enough, it's always funny. If you're not coming from a certain space, it's always nice how you can approach that specific industry through the eyes of a child, and therefore become actually very innovative, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. So that's definitely a very nice way to close this podcast. And to make a nice bridge to the other topic is like, if people are going to contemplate over these three big questions, how to really drive innovation in their life and in their business, there's no better place on earth, guys, to be in Bali currently, and then book one of these Stilt studios, which you definitely should all be checking around. I'm very impressed by the way it's being designed. And if you see that on such a small space, you can have such a rich experience in lush green garden and valleys. Truly amazing. So definitely going to check that out. There's currently, until the end of this year, 2020, if people are buying for $50 a ticket, which is normally $100, so you had a $50 off for a one-night stay, you can very naturally experience your stay there, and it's very likely that you also will bump into Flo himself, which could always be a very pleasant thing. So definitely go to the website, book a ticket, and go experience yourself. And to top this up, Flo is giving away as well one night today. So please drop us a message on our email, which is down in the show notes, why you believe that you, with your partner, should contemplate in the middle of nowhere about the three questions how you can innovate. Thank you very much, Flo, for your special time. It's amazing that even as friends that we also encounter each other on a regular basis, that even over Zoom we can have very valuable conversations. So it's all possible. Truly amazing. And people can find you where, if they want to know more about you, where's the best place to connect with you?
I mean, just reach out on the website. We have a contact field, or LinkedIn.
Perfect. So I will add your Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, everything else what is important that connects to you in the show notes. Thank you very much, Flo. Appreciate it. And chat later, man. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sven. It was a very nice chat. Thanks a lot.
Thank you guys for tuning in today at the Founders Tribe podcast. I truly hope you have found some inspiration and the golden nuggets so you can leverage this to lift your founders game. By the way, if you want to stay updated about our weekly releases, then please hit the subscribe button so you will never ever need to miss out and choose which one of the guests you can tune into. If you're planning to raise capital for your startup and would love to discover if you are fundraise ready, if your startup has what it takes, then please take our free signature fundraise quiz, where we will benchmark your answers against our 9-step Date Your Investor framework. As a result, you will receive a 20-page tailor-made recommendation report to be better tomorrow. Want to find out more? Go to www.thestartupchef.com, www.thestartupchef.com, Thanks for listening, and I hope to see you in the next episode.